accepting that I have this other sensor and I'm adapting to it again. This is one thing. So acceptation seems to work really well with this thing.
So, yeah, maybe we're going to get into this, but I guess in typically in biology, like organisms do have niches. So, is there some way to think about this?
Yeah, that's basically every goal is a niche.
Yeah, but you're just saying that you can move between niches like really readily, but typically like, you know, if you put something in a new environment, maybe you won't necessarily survive.
Well, you don't always move in niches, right? But the fact is you can.
Okay.
And the argument is that this type of phenomenon tells us that moving in niches is actually possible, rather than you move to a different niche and you have to do a compromise on the other thing, and therefore you don't move. And when you can't move to the niches, you die. Right? So this can happen, and I have an argument why moving in niches actually does happen and why it is surprisingly often possible, which is not always at all. Right? So this adaptation between niches, we already talked about that, and here's another one. We're now considering not the sideways adaptation, but inclusive adaptation. So niches are added, we don't move between niches, but niches are added. So basically the idea is we maximize the value function over all goal tasks that we so far have accumulated. We have lots of goal tasks, we maximize this over the goal tasks. And there's a pressure to perform well on all the tasks, not just a specific one. So the average needs to be over all the tasks. And here is how we model that. So we assume we have a set of tasks and we are optimal. Our sensor is optimal. We now get a new task for which S is near optimal. That is another task we are allowed to look at. So this task enters into our field of operation. The relevant information, optimal direct policy, is now computed, and we add it minimally to the sensor via an information bottleneck. Never mind about the details, but the point is that we add the sensor. We absorb the new sensor into the existing sensor, so the old tasks are possible, and the new tasks becomes optimal, and we incorporate that sensor. So essentially, as we do that, you can see the first goal was here, the second goal that we adopted is here, and these numbers show us which goals are adopted over time when we do that. And it turns out that new goals are adopted until we can resolve every goal very, very fast. What does it tell us? It means that the argument is we can, actually as an organism, incorporate very quickly maximal resolution. So there is a drive somehow that drives us towards really being able to resolve everything in very short time, although it doesn't look like it's actually necessary. So you adopt one goal, second goal, third goal, and then you're already at the maximum. Now this is of course a toy example, but I do think that there's much more general principle behind it. And the general principle is, that's what we're asking, is it typical or is it just lucky? And I think it's typical. And how generic is that? And here's the idea why we think that is actually generic. And this is, I already talked to some people about that, it's piggyback information. So, what does it mean? This is the relevant information. This is information that actuation wants to know about the world to solve the task. This is the information, however, that the sensor has about the world, which is in general larger, in fact much, much larger. Much, much larger. Much means can be factor 1,000, can be factor 1,000,000, can be really orders of magnitude larger. So even if that is an optimal, basically the sensor cannot be made better than a certain amount, and it's basically inefficient by design or by information theory. It is basically the predictive inefficiency. I think Jim Crutchfield calls it criticity. Susanne Still calls this useless nostalgia, but I prefer to call it piggyback information, yes.
So like, I generally agree with this when you're like editing existing sensor, but what when you developed eyes, you didn't have light sensitivity before.
Yes.
That is like a new dimension or something?
Yes.
How does that work with this principle?
Well, it fits very very well, right? If you look at eyes, you find surprisingly many species that have eyes at near maximal resolution. And that doesn't make sense, right?
I mean more like, I agree with once you have an eye,
Yes.
it has this tendency to go to like sort of like be very good, and then it's good enough, and then you don't have to get to make it any better.
Yeah.
But like, some species have eyes versus don't, like develop hearing versus not, like modalities. Adding a new modality is not inefficient, even though it's you have all the information you could possibly use, except for this other information, this other dimension that you really need. That is, no matter how much eyesight you add, you don't get any hearing.
Okay, I'm not talking about that here.
Yeah.
Your question is absolutely justified, but of course, when we're discovering new modalities, is a totally different ballpark.
Right. Yeah, I guess I'm asking, like, how do you this idea that your bottleneck information vastly exceeds.
It talks about the modality
for a given modality.
Yeah. In this case, yes. Yes.
Okay, yeah.
We it was originally also the question: do you discover modality? It's a long story, but essentially, if you don't have any access to the modality, finding it can be taking a long time.
Right.
So, for example, discovering radioactivity is something that maybe some organisms react to that. There are some fungi that live in Chernobyl and actually use melanin to do radiosynthesis, not photosynthesis. It's very weird, right? This is biology for you. But normally, discovering a modality from scratch is not an easy game. I mean, electrical eels and things like that, they have discovered completely.
Do you know of anyone who's done just like research on that? Like if I wanted to pair this with like modality discovery as a.
Well, we can discuss it afterwards.
Cool.
It's a bit longer story. Here it was trying to make a point that evolution pushes the boundaries.
Yeah.
That is really surprising. And basically the argument that I have is it's actually this piggyback effect. Let's call it piggyback information, that you have much more information from your sensor than you actually asked for originally. It comes with much more information. And essentially, basically, the fact that you have this extra information gives two consequences. You have leeway for travel between niches, because you can move to another niche, because the information is already there, you just do different things with it. Right? You already captured the information, it's already in your brain, and now you do something else with it. Right? It's like reading a paper and discovering that whatever is in the paper has information about something that you didn't think of doing, but now start doing. Or you can use existing information in a fresh way. So let me show you what it means. So this is the environment, and the environment has the information stored in an inefficient way. So these bubbles are basically this kind of inefficient way of storing information. These are the actuators. The sensors picks up something from there. The actuators do something sensible. The actuators now are able to do more because there's more information that's useful. But as the actuators become more useful, the sensors now adapt to support these extra actuations to become even more good. And now the sensors have a pressure to become bigger and capture more of this environmental information. And now the actuators are pushed up, the sensors are pushed up, and more information here in the environment becomes useful. Yeah, the bubbles disappear if you can see it. Sorry. And so basically the argument is that this pushes itself up to a limit where physical, energetic, space, or heat production limits peter out and it can't do further. So the argument is that if you have this push towards better and better performance, this is not by chance, this is actually proper informational pressure to succeed. So I'll skip that one because I want to go to empowerment. This is our goals, but here comes the last part of the talk. And this basically, we talked about what evolution does to get you somewhere, and that's not where I want to be, sorry. And that's basically the concept of universal utilities. So evolution has no direction in principle, you survive or you don't survive, and basically that's all that matters. And the concept of a task and of a reward is not sharply defined, so people will always say, oh, task and goal is nothing like that, right? You survive, yeah, you have to have offspring basically, but even that task is not really clear, right? The fact is that if I'm a tapeworm, basically once I sit comfortably in the back end of some animal, that's it. and I'm a bit like a passenger in a plane. Food just comes by and I just pick it up as it goes. There's no goal to be solved. So the concept of the task and reward is not sharp. And what's worse, the search space is sparse and large. This is the main critique of people that don't like naive Darwinism. Darwin, by the way, was not a naive Darwinist, I have to say, right? So there are people who misunderstood him. But pure Darwinism basically says you get feedback by death. That's it. Okay? You do something wrong, you die. Of course, it's not quite as bad. You have dense networks that guide living beings, so if you're hungry, you want to eat. But these are very fundamental senses, and there are many of these networks are organism specific. If I'm a naked mole, live underground, then I can tolerate much more CO2 than I can do as a human. As a human, I cannot do that. And there are, if I design artificial agents, many of these designs are very specific to that particular agent. And evolutionary success suggests a more fundamental principle. So the question is there something that's more universal than that to get me in success? So there are many people that suggested universal drives and utilities. Essentially, artificial curiosity by Schmidhuber, he was probably the first to actually suggest that. Learning progress by Udier and so on. There are many such principles. Probably the closest to ours is predictive information, homokinesis, and causal entropic forcing. And here is the idea. So basically, we claim that if you're an organism, you want to have an informational impedance match. It means you want your sensors and your actuators to fit well into the ecological niche. Basically, the actuators should change things that change in the world, and your sensors should pick up these changes. And this should be clean. So basically, formally, we want to maximize the potential to inject the information environment, change it, and to pick up this change. To pick up this information. That's basically in a nutshell.
It's like an echo.
Hmm?
Like an echo. I want to take action
Yes,
and then
yes.
hear my echo.
Yes. Yes.
Is there a metric for that?
Yes.
Oh.
That's what's coming. So basically, the naive motto is from Tobias Jung, a former student of mine. He said, being in control of one's destiny is good. Simple motto. That's if there's one thing you remember from this talk, that's the one thing you should. And you need to know it. So it's not enough to be in control of your destiny. You need to know it, and that's why we called it empowerment. We stole that word from social sciences because they made the point you can change your world, and you know that you can change this world. So basically, formally now, and you ask for a formal characterization. You want an information theoretic version of combined controllability and observability. You can control your environment and you can observe your change, right? So it's a link to control theory. It's a generalization of control theory. And here's how we formalize it. Here's our network again. Little network runs around. I take away the memory. I take away the link between sensors and actuators. And now I do the following. I activate this action, do something. It influences the world. I wait a step, do something again. Can be depending on that, it's okay. Again, I wait a step, and I do something again. Whatever. And then I observe. What did I do? So I did something, what happened? This can be modeled as a probability distribution over the actions. They can be dependent on each other, don't have to be independent. And this probability distribution induces something on the observed distribution S. So there's an induction here, and now I maximize this potential influence. This thing will depend on where we started to, right? So there's a start, and then there's this influence that I have. And so I write it down as formal, we call that free will actions, so because they're completely freely chosen. They don't even have to make sense. All they have to do, they have to maximize the information that I can inject into the states, and into the sensor, sorry. So I maximize all the actions that I can do and what they do to the S. This we call empowerment because it's case steps. These are 3 steps. This is a 3-step empowerment. I should be a bit more honest because it depends on the starting state, right? The different starting states will give me different values. So empowerment at the starting state is this maximization. And write it a little bit more compactly. So here's the final formula. Empowerment of a given starting state is the potential to send information from this sequence of k actions into the final sensor if I start in W. That's empowerment. Empowerment is a function of the state. It's a channel capacity of the state, yes.
So my experience, some of my observations are really important to me, and some of them less so.
Right.
And so like, I care a lot about being able to inject states that cause me to observe myself at 98 degrees body temperature, but less about, being able to inject random changes into like, drawing things on the walls.
Right.
Is there some weighting there for like importance of observation?
When you introduce weighting, so the first model doesn't introduce weighting at all, and you get a lot with that already.
Yeah.
You can, of course, endow the sensor with sensitivity for certain things. So you're not sensitive to small things, you're sensitive to bigger things. Right? And then you will see these bigger things, but not the smaller things. They will look random. Of course, you're completely right. In general, I could say, oh, I'm really keen on being able to put this dirt piece at this precise location. If I do that, fine. But it turns out it has no consequences for the future. So in other words, this dirt piece will be blown away by the wind, so it's very noisy, so I can ignore it. I don't care about remembering it either. So most of these things emerge correctly.
It emerges because if I fail to, the observation of myself at the body temperature increases my future empowerment. Right?
Yes.
I lose future. The weighting comes out of what drives survival.
Yes. In the end of the day, that weight comes.
Yeah, it's all back to the evolution.
Absolutely.
Ultimately, it's always survival that drives everything, but
exactly, it is a proxy for survival. In fact, empowerment becomes zero when you die.
Wait, sorry. Can we say more? I've also had some of this question. So,
right.
It looks like this because you also said the sensors get better, so I can sense more things. So
yes, that was a separate phenomenon. Yes.
Yeah, but I guess it seems then hard to understand. You're kind of saying, oh, there's something that I really care about, like distinguishing between.
Yes.
But my sensory information really can distinguish between these things because it's really good.
Yeah, the question is what your actuators can do. Your actuators cannot do everything, right?
Yeah.
I may be able to distinguish Andromeda and Alpha Centauri and that, but I can't move them. So it doesn't care. It cares only about things. Empowerment only cares about things you can actually change.
Yeah. So an example of like making a dust particle in an exact location.
Yeah.
That's like pretty high information.
Yeah, but the problem is there's a gust of wind that's gone, and then the empowerment is really low because empowerment takes into account noise. There's noise in between.
So there's noise in the world state.
Yeah. There could be a lot of noise. If there's a lot of noise, you have no empowerment.
Right. So the real reason is different because the transitions from WI to WI plus 1
yes.
is very stochastic.
Everything can be noisy here.
Okay, great.
There's nothing that has to be determined.
Yeah.
And in fact, noise will actually reduce empowerment. So this gives you an automatic weighting on what's important, right? Things that are very noisy from the outset, you probably don't give them much empowerment. So a few properties, and I'll show some examples. It's a pseudo-utility. You can use it as a utility directly. Not a reward, a utility. It's not the difference, it's a utility. So basically, you go to the state with the highest, where you make the greatest gain in empowerment. It's not requiring external specifications. Don't need external rewards. You have just the world dynamics. That is very important. It's local. You don't need to solve a reinforcement learning problem all the way back. You don't need a reward function. And essentially, you can interpret it as how many futures that are distinguishable can I generate?
It's really over observations, not states, right? Because it's about like observations got sensors. So it's actually a function of observation. And you have beliefs about the world that causes the sensors, but like ultimately it's driven by.
You have a forward model. You need a forward model.
You need a forward model to do it, but it's driven by the match between your information out and information in.
Yes.
It's not the state of the world is in a belief. It's inferred. It's not like
the state of the world where it comes from doesn't matter. So if you know it, you can use it. If you don't know it, it's relative to that belief.
Yeah. In practice, if you don't have a model of the world, you will always have shift empowerment because you can't.
Well, you can improve.
Right.
You can prove it. It's epistemics, right?
Yeah.
So if I have this really complicated tool that I don't know how to use, then empowerment is low. But if I have a precise model of how this tool will affect my environment, then empowerment is high. So it depends on what you know. Yes. So there are many interpretations of that. Mobility, money is of course one, because it's a potential. It's not what you actually do. It's what you could do. Affordance and many others. But I want to move to some examples. Here's a nice one, because my time is running out. I prefer to show the showing example.
Yeah.
So here's a good one. This is basically this is a nice example. This is essentially a Pac-Man. Scenario, basically the Pac-Man. It has some technical aspects to it, but I'm not going to that. The Pac-Man is basically running. These ghosts are very aggressive, so they are more aggressive than the standard Pac-Man ghost. And the agent has a forward model of the ghost. And basically, if it is caught by the ghost, it dies. So it really doesn't like to be caught. But notice one thing, that the agent actually wants to control the world. So it wants to have maximum options, but it also likes to control the ghosts. So it trolls them. It pulls them behind it. It's not just trying to survive, it actually tries to control the ghosts, which is kind of funny, because that's not what you would expect, but it is so capable that it can troll the hosts. Here's another one. This is a double pendulum. Empowerment is here essentially, you can do a bang-bang control, and it has LQR2. This is a bit longer story. It's a bit of a longer story, but essentially when you run it, it actually balanced a double pendulum. No reward here. This was at a time, this is an old piece of work, but I like to show it because it was at a time where double pendulum balancing was considered a hard problem. And basically all the benchmarks at that time were just happy with if the pendulum went up enough, far enough. No hope of balancing at that time. Today, of course, you can do it with networks, but this is a really minimalistic approach where you just have a model of this thing and you maximize empowerment locally, no rewards. This is my favorite. Okay, this is my favorite. So it's basically, let's call it the climate change catastrophe, or lava change catastrophe. So there's here an agent, and this agent lives in a Minecraft world where there's a lava river, and the lava river is here. You can see it. The agent can move blocks, can destroy them, can carry them around. Can run them again. Let me run it again. And you see that the agent builds a bridge over the lava stream. Okay, this is the first example. But now let's do the real interesting one. So here is a world, and in this world we are really nasty. We create a climate catastrophe based on lava. We pour lava on this world. And this agent, this pure empowerment, right? This agent computes how much future states it has. If it dies, it steps into lava, it dies, no empowerment. So this is a stupid politician. So this stupid politician waited too long, and lava almost encompassed the whole world. So had to build an emergency island and step on the island. Not a very good solution, but at least survived. Okay, the island is enclosed by the lava.
What is the K that you use for this? Like how many steps ahead?
15, 1, 5.
Okay.
So here's the same scenario, but in this case the agent was a bit smarter. I call it the Dutch agent because he built a dam and a ditch. And you know the Dutch live underwater. They have all this sea level kept out, so built the dam and ditch and has some space to live. The lava stops at the ditch and the dam. So that is kind of slightly better solution. My favorite one, however, is the third one. This is the third one. And this guy does the following. Won't spoil it, so it moves around and puts a cork in here and goes underground. We did not code any of them. All we coded is maximize your empowerment. Maximize how many states you have in the future. And this emerged. Right? And this was done with sampling of the future, so it has some noise factor in it. That's why the solutions are not identical. Basically, this is 5% of the runs. The stupid politicians, 85% of the runs, and the rest of the runs are like 10-15% is the ditch and dam. So these are some examples of what you can do with this empowerment methodology. There's many more, and basically the idea is organisms have nobody to tell them what to do. The question is, how do they found out? And our suggestion is that organisms use fundamental principles, and candidate for such principles would be information theoretic ones. And this is one of them that we suggest. Maximize your options. And it can be local. So you don't need extremely long horizons to make it work. You do not have a full reinforcement learning system pushing back all the utility all the way back. It's completely enough to have empowerment along your